Shalom, welcome to the Jewish Task Force, JTF. My name is Chaim Ben Pesach. We're going to share with you the results of the latest Gallup poll, and Gallup is the gold standard of polls, on how the overwhelming majority of Americans have now turned against Israel. The overwhelming majority. And against almost everything Israel does. Even against Israel's strikes on the Iranian nuclear sites to prevent Iran, a Muslim terrorist country, from acquiring nuclear weapons. Even that, the vast majority of Americans are against now. They have turned against Israel completely. It was all predictable. It's something we've been predicting, of course, for a long time. We've warned that this is what's going to happen. And in the end, the only sane policy is for Israel to be independent and to go it alone and to develop her own policies, to have trade and to have relations with other countries, but not be dependent on so-called foreign aid. That's the only answer in the end. And then we won't have to worry about what the poll says or doesn't say. But before we get to that very important topic, this program is dedicated to a refuah shlema, a complete recovery for Shlomo ben Sarah, Ruth bat Sarah, Dorit bat Sarah, Reuven ben Shoshana, David ben Edna, Ashadina bat Violet, and Batsheva bat Malka, and to Ilui Neshamot, elevating of the souls for Sharon Mitman, Malka bat Meir, Allegra bat Shlomo, Daniel Neinkin, Victor Chazdai, Pesach Seb ben Dov, Lunita Adler, Shifra Hoffman, Reuven Hoffman, Barry Hoffman, Rab Mir Kahana, Rab Benjamin Kahana, Tzipora Fegi bat Liba, Yosef Ben Meir, Robert Mittman, Dennis Shore, Helen Friedman, Charles Olat, Yair Lavin, Rachel D., and David Ben Avraham. Jews are so worried about what the Goyim will think. They're so terrified of anti-Semitism. That's all they think about. That's all they care about, is how to please the Goyim. The Goyim means the nations in Hebrew, and the nations is another word that is used for non-Jews, for the Gentiles. And Jews are always so obsessed. Benjamin Netanyahu is obsessed with his relationship with the United States and the President of the United States and how to please the United States. This is his obsession in life. That's one of the reasons why Israel can't win any wars anymore. Now, before I get into the statistics here, therefore, that are going to terrify certain Jews who are going to say, oh, that's very bad. We have to do something about that because we need American support. We need American foreign aid. No, we don't need American so-called foreign aid. It hurts Israel. It's bad for Israel. Am levadad yishkonu vagoyim lo yitchashav. This is a nation that shall dwell alone and not be reckoned among the nations. It is a blessing when Israel is alone. And Israel wins her great victories when she's alone, when the United States was against Israel, and Israel defied U.S. pressure and defied world pressure, like in the 1948 War of Independence or the 1967 Six-Day War. Israel won the most miraculous, spectacular victories when she went it alone and ignored U.S. and international pressure. But when Israel is running a policy that is designed to slavishly do whatever the United States and the rest of the world demands of her, she has no chance of winning, and her very survival is in jeopardy. But let me, for those who are going to be worried about this or think that this is a video with bad news, because I'm going to be giving you statistics showing how everybody's turning against Israel. For those of you who think this is such bad news, let me tell you something. For those Jews out there and the righteous Gentiles who support Israel, if you have an ounce of sanity, you'll understand that this, in the end, is not going to lead to the end of Israel. Israel will survive and will triumph, and we will have the final redemption, and God will redeem Israel as he promised in the Bible. And God is testing Israel. All of this is a test. And Israel, though, must go it alone. Israel has to win by herself. If she doesn't win by herself, she's not doing Kiddush Hashem, she's not sanctifying God's name. So we're going to give you the results of this poll, but remember, in the end, Israel will win. Long after America You listen carefully to what I'm saying. Long after America disappears, and that is very likely to happen. America is on the way to self-destruction. And long after all the European countries and all the others that are attacking Israel disappear, Israel will still exist. Israel will exist and triumph and will exist forever and ever. That is the destiny of Israel. So the good news is we are going to win in the end because God has promised us this, and that's God's plan, and God is stronger than all the nations of the world and stronger than the traitor Israeli leaders. And God intends to bring that about. But in the interim, until we achieve that great final redemption, we want to avoid unnecessary suffering and death and tragedy. And so we do everything we can to try to wake people up so that we can adopt a policy that will give Israel a quick and speedy redemption for the Jews and for the righteous Gentiles. But first of all, let's speak about this Gallup poll. Now, the Gallup poll has been around for many, many years. I think 70 or 80 years. I don't know for sure if it's 70 years, 80 years, 90 years, at least 70 years, at least since the 1950s, and maybe even longer than that. And the Gallup poll is what's called the gold standard of American polls. It, generally speaking, has been quite accurate. And how do we know if a poll is accurate? You look at the results of the presidential election. The Gallup poll has, in the overwhelming majority of cases, correctly picked the winner in presidential elections. The Gallup poll correctly picks winners in races for governor, U.S. senator, and other elections. The Gallup poll is a poll that, generally speaking, over the years has, in the overwhelming majority of cases, has been quite accurate. And by the way, the results of this poll are not different from the results of other polls. I'm just giving you this poll as an example, because polling in general is in line with this poll. Polls in general reflect the same figures that you're going to see in this poll. Now, Israel is waging a wimpy, pathetic so-called war in Gaza, where they're shipping thousands of truckloads of food and other essential equipment and stock to the enemy, to the Hamas terrorists. Thousands of truckloads, thousands and thousands of tons of food and other assistance are being shipped to the enemy. What type of war is that? The United States never did that in any of her wars against any country, ever. No other country ever did anything so insane. And so Israel's war in Gaza is a wimpy, pathetic war. Israel's not doing 1% of what she could be doing in Gaza. Israel should throw all the Arab Muslim Nazis who want to destroy her out of Gaza. And Israel could do it easily. Israel could have won that war in 1 or 2 days. In 1956, in the Sinai campaign, Israel liberated Gaza in 1.5 days. In the 1967 war, also in 1.5 days. It took for Israel to liberate all of Gaza. Gaza is a small area. 1.5 days. Twice Israel did that already, and Israel's army was much smaller and much weaker than Israel's army is today. Israel is very capable of winning in 1 or 2 days in Gaza. And this war has gone on for 2 years already. And hundreds of Jewish soldiers are being blown up and killed all the time by booby traps, because they're sending them into areas where they're booby traps, where the terrorists deliberately booby trap and blow them up. And Israel is sending the troops there to be murdered. And the reason this happens is because Israel doesn't want to destroy the local population or attack the local population, because they may be innocent civilians. The civilians there are not innocent. They all support the Hamas terrorists. They all support the Hamas terrorists. In every home that Israelis went to, when Israelis saw the homes of the residents of Gaza, in every single home there were pictures of the Hamas terrorists, and the Hamas terrorists were regarded as heroes. In every home, there are pictures, maps of Israel, of maps of the Middle East where Israel doesn't exist. It's all called Palestine. In other words, Israel's destroyed. There are no innocent civilians in this situation. But anyway, in order not to hurt the Arab Nazi enemies of Israel, they're Jewish soldiers. Jewish soldiers are being blown up. And let me tell you, one Israeli soldier is worth more than all the Arab Muslim Nazis of Gaza put together. And in this wimpy, pathetic war that's dragging on and on and on with all these unnecessary terrible, painful casualties for the people of Israel, what do the American people think? Do the American people support what Israel is doing in Gaza? Only 32% of Americans in the Gallup poll approve of Israel's military campaign in Gaza. 60% oppose it. And the reason they oppose it is not for the reason I'm against what they're doing because they're not winning effectively. But in this poll, that's not the way it works. The 60% who are against it because they don't want Israel to do anything against the Hamas terrorists in Gaza. 60% disapprove of Israel being in Gaza or having any military operation in Gaza. 60%, only 32% approve. That's almost 2-1. But to show you how anti-Semitic and how anti-Israel the American public has become, even Israel's action in what is known as the 12-Day War against Iran's Nazi nuclear program, nuclear bomb-making program. Israel went there to prevent Iran from building nuclear bombs. And as President Trump and the Defense Department of the United States and American officials have said, Iran was only weeks away, at the most several months, but maybe only weeks away from building nuclear bombs. They were on the fast track to actually building nuclear bombs. That's like putting nuclear bombs in the hands of Islamic terrorists, because the Iran regime is a terrorist regime, and a regime, by the way, that believes in death. So it's a regime that would use these nuclear bombs and has promised to do so. So this is something where anyone with even an ounce of fairness or sanity would automatically say, well, Israel was right for doing that. Even Israel's action against Nazi Iran's nuclear program, only 38% of the American people approve even of that. 54% disapprove. They wanted Israel to sit back and allow Iran to build nuclear bombs. 54%. And if you think those figures are bad, and the figures are really bad, if you think America, if you're like the pathetic, wimpy, ghetto-minded Jews who think we can't survive 5 minutes without American foreign aid, if you're in that category, then you really should be worried about the next figure. Because as bad as these figures are, and these big figures are terrible for you if you want American foreign aid, the next figure is even worse. People aged 18 to 34, in other words, the future of America, the future generation, people from the ages of 18 to 34, from their teens until their mid-30s, that generation. Only 9% of them approve of Israel's military operation in Gaza. 9%, 91% wouldn't say that they approve. In fact, overwhelming majority disapprove. Only 9% approve. And only 15% approve of Israel's actions against Iran's nuclear bomb-making program. Even that, only 15% approve of that. Even there, by the way, look at what Netanyahu did. Israel could have gone in, sent troops in, and destroyed the entire nuclear bomb-making program by herself. She would have had to land troops and move in and go underground into the underground facility. There was one underground facility which the Israeli Air Force did not have powerful enough bombs to destroy. But there was an entrance to the facility which Iranians have to use to get in. They have to get in. The Israeli army would just go in, kill everybody there, take over the entrance, and go in and go inside and manually go in and blow up everything and destroy everything inside. That Israel certainly could have done. But instead of doing that, Netanyahu practically begged Donald Trump to get involved and have the United States drop bombs there. And so the job wasn't finished because the bombs that Trump dropped there didn't destroy everything. And Israel didn't do the job by herself. And look at the consequences. Only 15% of Americans aged 18 to 34 approve even of Israel's actions against Iran's nuclear bomb-making program. How extreme can you get? there is no chance, zero chance, that the United States is going to continue to supply foreign aid to Israel in perpetuity, forever. That's just not going to happen. And you people who are not willing to wake up to the reality are condemning Israel to a very serious catastrophe, because Israel is suddenly going to be faced with a cutoff of all foreign aid and all weapons when Israel's not prepared for that. Israel has to now prepare herself to become militarily and economically independent from the United States, which she can very easily do. In 1948, when Israel had only 600,000 Jews and didn't have any tanks or any jet fighters. Later, they got some jet fighters from Czechoslovakia later in the war. But in the beginning of the war, they had no tanks, no jets, nothing. And the whole Arab world said they're going to march in on Israel and destroy Israel and finish Hitler's job, finish what Hitler did during the Holocaust. And this is 1948, only 3 years after World War II and the Holocaust ended. So 3 years later, they said, you know what? We're going to finish what Hitler did, and we're going to wipe out 600,000 more Jews. And the whole Arab world was ready to march on Israel to do this. And the Arab world, of course, had tanks and had jet fighters and had military supplies and had organized armies. And British commanders, the British fought on the side of the Arab Nazis to destroy Israel. Lord Glubb was the commander of the Jordanian Legion. The goal of the British to give lectures to Israel. The British murdered 6 million Jews during the Holocaust, and by closing the doors of the land of Israel to Jews who wanted to escape from Nazi Europe. The British closed the doors, and the British and the Americans refused to bomb the rail lines to Auschwitz and refused to bomb the death camps and refused to do the things that would have stopped the Holocaust dead in its tracks. They could have stopped the Holocaust anytime. Anytime they could have stopped the Holocaust, and deliberately did not do so. They wanted the Jews to be murdered. But anyway, the British and the Arabs and a whole organized campaign, 7 Arab armies were on Israel's border, ready to attack Israel in 1948. And the Jews, with homemade weapons, it was just a joke, 600,000 Jews were going to have to fight back and defend themselves against that. And the United States threatened Israel, demanded that Israel not come into being. Despite the fact that after Israel came into being, because President Truman was running for re-election, President Truman, by the way, was an anti-Semite, a notorious anti-Semite. But despite the fact that Truman later he diplomatically recognized Israel after Israel did come into being in order to get votes. But the diplomatic recognition meant nothing. Meant nothing. Stop worrying about diplomatic recognitions or diplomatic relations. Stop worrying about those things. On the ground, in practical terms, that means nothing. When the Arab armies come to attack you, you can't wave, oh, we have diplomatic recognition from America. You can't slaughter us. That's not going to do any good. What did matter was arms. And Truman imposed an arms embargo on Israel. And other nations in Europe had an arms embargo on Israel, while the Arabs were being fully armed. And so Israel faced the ultimate pressure from President Truman and Secretary of State Marshall not to create a Jewish state. And the odds seemed to be so overwhelming against the Jews. And yet, because of pressure from the Irgun, from Etzel and Lehi, the 2 underground freedom-fighting organizations, David Ben-Gurion, under pressure from them, did declare a Jewish state anyway. He defied American pressure. The Jews declared a Jewish state, and they fought back and won the War of Independence against all odds. Without any American aid, America was supporting the Arabs, and the British were supporting the Arabs. And Israel, in that, because when the Americans imposed an embargo on all arms shipments to Israel, they knew that the British and other European countries were supplying the Arabs. Israel didn't have such supplies in the beginning of the war and for the first few months of the war. And so And so that means the United States was effectively supporting the Arabs and was against creating a Jewish state. There were all these Arab states in the Middle East. There were all these Muslim countries in the world, but there couldn't be even one Jewish state. That was official American policy. That was British policy. That was the policy of all these countries that were responsible for the Holocaust, did nothing to save the Jews during the Holocaust, and were ready to see Israel be destroyed now. And in a situation like that, without any American foreign aid, without any American arms shipments, without any assistance from the United States, Israel miraculously beats back 7 invading Arab armies, outnumbered 100 to 1, and wins the War of Independence, and the Jewish state comes into being. Unbelievable miracle. 19 years later, in 1967, Arab armies march on Israel's borders. The Egyptian Nazi dictator Gamal Abdul Nasser promises to push the Jews into the sea and finish Hitler's job and exterminate the Jews. Open speeches in the UN by Ahmed Shukari, the ambassador of Saudi Arabia and the first leader of the PLO, saying we will push the Jews into the sea. Ahmed Shukari said, when this war is over, not a single Jew will be left alive. Openly saying this in the UN. And the United States, under Lyndon Johnson, again, slaps an arms embargo on Israel and threatens Israel and warns Israel, do not strike first. You take the first blow, which in the Middle East is very, very bad when you have to take the first blow. If you're the attacker, you're better off in the Middle East. That's why Israel had a policy of preemptive strikes first. That preemptive means preventive strikes, to go first at your enemy before they hit you. Before they attack you, you strike them first. And that's what Israel eventually did in the 1967 Six-Day War. But Johnson and the United States warned and threatened Israel not to do that, and they did, and they slapped an arms embargo on Israel and punished Israel after the 67 war with an arms embargo for the fact that Israel defied American pressure and struck first. Israel ignored the American pressure, did strike first, and won the most spectacular, miraculous victory since the days of the Bible. A victory that was right out of the pages of the Bible. In 6 days, defeating your enemies, being outnumbered 100 to 1, and on 3 different fronts, defeating all of your enemies, and Israel becoming 4 times her original size. Israel quadrupled in size in only 6 days. I mean, where do you get miracles like this? Right out of the Bible. Israel was alone. This is a nation that shall dwell alone and not be reckoned among the nations. When Israel is alone, she wins miraculous victories. But after that, when Israel decided that she wants American weapons and wants to have an alliance with the United States, that was the beginning of the end. Since then, Israel has not won any wars. The United States has not allowed Israel to win any wars. And so the policy of depending on foreign aid and getting arms shipments from the United States has been a catastrophe for Israel. Israel would still be in the days of the Six-Day War and winning miraculous victories if she had not followed that policy. If she had followed a policy of independence, she could have achieved independence. She could have. They have brilliant Jewish scientists and Jewish brains there that are incredible. They could have achieved it. They could have achieved independence in weaponry and in the military sphere, and they could have achieved independence economically. But they chose not to do that, and so since the 1967 Six-Day War, Israel has not won any wars. The only hope we have for turning this around is to wake the Jews up and make them understand Israel is not like other countries. Israel is God's nation. It's a light unto the nations, and a nation of priests, and a holy nation. At least that's what it's intended to be. That's what its destiny eventually is. And until Israel fulfills that destiny and lives up to her role that she's supposed to be playing in this world, you're going to see a lot of tragedy in the Middle East and a lot of tragedy throughout the world. The whole world gets punished as well, because the whole world is pursuing policies that hurt Israel. So they also deserve punishment, and they get the punishment as well. The only way to turn that around is for Israel to fulfill her role as a light unto the nations and a holy nation, a nation of priests, as a nation that against all odds wins spectacular victories, stuns the world. Now, we saw a little bit of that even in the war with Iran. We saw Israel spectacularly taking out all these scientists and striking at Iran's infrastructure. I mean, we began to get a little taste of that in the beginning of the Iran war, but then Netanyahu spoiled it by having to invite Trump in and had the United States drop those heavy bombs, which didn't even do the job on the Iranian nuclear facility. The other Iranian nuclear facilities, by the way, Israel already had destroyed. If you want a Jewish people that are going to do what the Bible says they're supposed to do, that are going to do what God commands them to do, that are going to bring about the final redemption, if you want a Jewish people that's going to stun the world with Jewish idealism and Jewish ingenuity and Jewish faith and determination and perseverance and tenacity, if you want a Jewish people that's going to bring that message to the world, this JTF, this is the organization to support. Because we're the only organization outside of Israel that supports the Hilltop Youth, and we give 100% of our budget to the heroic Hilltop Youth. All of our budget goes to the Hilltop Youth. And they are the Jewish heroes of our generation. They're the people who've given up everything, all the comforts that they could have. I mean, these are brilliant Jewish kids who could be high-tech inventors and all types of entrepreneurs. They've got the brains to do it and the discipline to do it. And instead of that, they surrender all of that, and they use their ingenuity and their creativity to build strategic outposts in Judea and Samaria to prevent the creation of a so-called Palestinian state. By the way, there is no Palestinian people. There is no Palestine. Never was, never will be. It's a historic lie. But they still want to create a so-called Palestinian state, which would be national suicide for Israel. And Israel will come under massive pressure. You see these polls that we've discussed on this program? Those polls reflect what America is going to become. America, in the end, in 3 years, can easily become Israel's worst enemy. Easily. We have an American president who's elected, especially if the Democrats win. You got an American president like that who's hostile to Israel. They'll organize the whole world, which will gladly go along. So everybody will all join together, the whole world will all join together and gang up on Israel and pressure Israel to accept a Palestinian state. And again, that would be suicide for Israel. The only hope for stopping that are the Hilltop Youth. The Hilltop Youth, that's the hope for stopping it. Because they're building communities in Judea and Samaria that are, the Arabs were on the verge of taking over all of Judea and Samaria through illegal building. They were just going in and taking over, and the Israeli government did nothing, even though it violates all agreements, all the building was illegal. But the Israeli government, as we see how the politically correct forces allow the forces of evil to do whatever they want, no questions asked, and nothing is ever done to stop them. And that was what was happening in the Middle East. You had over 80,000 illegal buildings and structures created even in Section C, just in Section C of Judea and Samaria, over 80,000. They were taking over everything. They would have taken over 97% of Judea and Samaria by now, and there would be a Palestinian state already. The Hilltop Youth went in and blocked them and stopped them when everyone condemned the Hilltop Youth and were tearing and had to go back again and again because the Israeli army and Israeli police under Netanyahu were going in to destroy the Hilltop Youth communities. The same Israeli police and Israeli army and Israeli government that do nothing when Arabs build all over the place to destroy Israel, when the Hilltop Youth build a community in the heartland of biblical Israel to save Israel, suddenly they're able to go and destroy and take action. And we in JTF helped fund the rebuilding again and again of those communities. Just one of them, we mentioned that just one of them, for instance, we gave an example of 34 times in 1 year. Their community was destroyed, and they came and rebuilt again and again and again, and they're back there stronger than ever. They're not leaving. We got to support the heroic Hilltop Youth. They are the hope of Israel. They're the light of Israel. And they are the hope that we can turn this situation around. Eventually, the whole Jewish people are going to be like the Hilltop Youth. That's what a light unto the nations and a holy nation and nation of priests looks like. Idealists who are willing to give up everything for the good of the cause. That's the Hilltop Youth, and that's what the whole Jewish people will become. And when the Jewish people become like that and show the world that that's the correct way to go in life, living not for yourself, but living for the good of the world, that's the correct way. I'm not saying that you ignore your own needs. You have your own needs. You certainly take care of your family, that for sure. You take care of family first. But after you've taken care of your family, you are concerned and very concerned about what happens to your people and your brothers and sisters and to the righteous causes in the world. That does concern you very much. And for the Hilltop Youth, it's their whole life. For them, for their children, for their wives, for their children, because they have Hilltop Youth families now there. You have hundreds of Hilltop Youth families there. We've got to support them. Here's how you support the heroic Hilltop Youth. Here's how at least you play some role, in making a difference for the good of the world here. You go to our Hebrew main page, which is hayamin.org. And on hayamin.org, you'll see a donate button in English on top. You click on the donate button in English on top, and you can easily and conveniently donate in several minutes. You can make recurring monthly donations, or you can make one-time donations, or you can do both. You have the option there. When you get there, you'll see that you have the option to do whatever you choose in terms of how to donate. Very easy and convenient. That's if you want to do it online. If you want to do it through the regular mail, you just send checks and money orders made out to JTF, and you send it to JTF P.O. Box 650327, Fresh Meadows, New York 11365. And yes, you should definitely leave JTF in your will to help the heroic Hilltop Youth. When you leave this world, you want to leave this world a better place. Now, I know that there are people who say that we should focus on popular positions and take popular stands, but that's not what we're in this world for. We're in this world to tell the truth and to stand for the truth and to stand for what's right. And someday you'll see, someday all of us will see on the day of judgment that that was the smart thing to do. The Hilltop Youth, who are called idealists, are also the ultimate realists, because this is a world where you have a God that is idealistic. The very mere fact that he created us, he doesn't need us. God needs nothing. God is absolutely perfect. God is an idealist. And so this is a world where true idealism is also true realism. And we try to bring you this message every week. Remember, if you support the Hilltop Youth and you support this good cause, in the end, the Hilltop Youth are doing more for you than you're doing for them. And I think people can understand why, because obviously, our whole purpose in this world is to understand that every one of us has a higher calling in life. You're not in this world to eat popcorn and watch the horrible movies that Hollywood churns out now, or I don't know what other people do, or watch football and basketball and other ridiculous games. Watch rapists and criminals playing football and basketball and other games. That's not what you're in this world for. You're in this world to make this a better place and to prove that just as God shows his love for the world and for truth and justice, you've got to do the same thing. We have to emulate God, and we have to do what God commands us to do. And that means helping the heroic Hilltop Youth. For JTF until next week, this is Chaim Ben Pesach. Shalom.